The grand chambers of the Galactic Council stretched out like a vast cathedral, made of living crystal and flowing metal. 12 different species had built this place together over 3,000 years ago, and today it would witness something none of them expected. The air hummed with tension as representatives from across the galaxy took their assigned seats in the circular arrangement that had become the symbol of galactic unity. Ambassador Jake Morrison sat alone in the human section. His gray hair and lined face showed the weight of 30 years in diplomatic service, but his blue eyes remained sharp and focused. Around him, the other species chatted in their various languages, creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, and harmonic tones that had once fascinated him. Today it just sounded like noise. The crystalline Vorthak representatives gleamed under the chamber's soft lighting, their bodies catching and reflecting every photon like living prisms. They had called this meeting and everyone knew why. The amphibious Kalari delegates floated in their water-filled diplomatic pods, their large eyes watching everything with the patience of a species that had outlived 3 ice ages on their homeworld. The insectoid Zephyrians clustered together in their typical hive formation, communicating through pheromone releases that made the air around them shimmer with chemical messages. Other species filled the remaining seats. The gaseous nebulans existed in their containment suits. The rocky terraforms sat in specially reinforced chairs, and the energy-based Stellaris flickered in and out of visible spectrum as they struggled to maintain physical form. Each race represented thousands of years of evolution, civilization, and galactic citizenship. Each had earned their place through centuries of careful diplomacy and proven stability. Humans had been here for less than 200 years. Counselor Kathavar of the Vorthak rose from his crystalline throne, and the chamber fell silent. His voice resonated through both the air and the quantum communication field that allowed all species to understand each other perfectly. When he spoke, the words carried the weight of absolute authority. "We gather today to address a matter of critical importance to galactic stability and peace," Kathavar began, his crystalline form pulsing with different colors as emotions flickered through his structure. "The species known as humanity has violated 17 separate galactic treaties in the past 50 standard years. They have engaged in unauthorized terraforming of protected worlds, established colonies beyond their designated expansion zones, and consistently ignored population growth limitations established by this council." Jake Morrison felt every eye, sensor, and awareness field in the chamber focus on him. He kept his expression neutral, his hands folded calmly in his lap. He had known this day would come eventually. The other species had watched humanity's explosive growth across the galaxy with growing concern and, if he was honest, growing fear. Furthermore, Kathavar continued, humanity has demonstrated a disturbing pattern of technological advancement that disrupts established galactic economic systems. Their manufacturing capabilities have undercut traditional suppliers, their agricultural techniques have made entire sectors obsolete, and their research practices show a reckless disregard for the careful scientific protocols that have maintained galactic stability for millennia. The Kalari representative, Ambassador Plishko, added his voice to the charges. His words bubbled through the water in his diplomatic pod before being translated into the common tongue. Human expansion threatens the delicate balance we have maintained. In 2 centuries, they have established more colonies than most species manage in 2 millennia. This rapid growth is unsustainable and dangerous. One by one, the other species added their complaints. The Zephyrians spoke of trade disruptions caused by human efficiency. The Nebulons worried about human research into dimensional physics that could affect their gaseous homeworlds. The terraforms complained that human mining operations extracted resources faster than planetary ecosystems could recover. Jake Morrison listened to it all without interruption. These were not new complaints. Humanity had heard them all before in smaller meetings, in diplomatic notes, and increasingly stern warnings. But today felt different. Today felt final. Kathavar raised one crystalline appendage and the chamber fell silent again. Therefore, by unanimous vote of the founding species, this council presents humanity with the following ultimatum. The words hit the chamber like a physical force. All human colonies beyond the Sol system must be abandoned within 1 standard galactic year. All human expansion beyond your species' designated zone is permanently forbidden. Human population growth must be capped at current levels and subject to council oversight. All human trade agreements with non-council species must be terminated immediately. The silence stretched for long moments. Jake Morrison could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. These weren't sanctions or restrictions. This was exile disguised as regulation. Should humanity refuse these terms, Kethvar continued, you will be expelled from the Galactic Council permanently. All trade agreements with council species will be terminated. All access to galactic trade routes will be revoked. Your species will be declared in violation of galactic law, and any council member will be free to take appropriate action against human interests. Jake Morrison stood slowly. Every species in the chamber watched as the sole human representative rose to address the most powerful political body in the galaxy. When he spoke, his voice was calm and measured, carrying clearly through the vast chamber. Councillor Kethvar, honored representatives of the galactic community, Jake began, I hear the concerns you have raised about my species. I understand the fears that drive these ultimatums. Humanity has indeed grown rapidly, advanced quickly, and changed much in our short time among the stars. He paused, looking around the chamber at faces, sensors, and awareness fields that had already decided humanity's fate. However, I cannot accept these terms on behalf of my people without consulting with Earth's government. The decision to abandon dozens of worlds, to accept permanent restrictions on our species' growth and development, to submit to oversight of our most basic freedoms, these are not choices I can make alone. Kethvar's crystalline form flickered with what might have been surprise or amusement. Very well, Ambassador Morrison. The Council grants humanity 48 standard hours to provide a final answer. Use this time wisely. Consider carefully what your species stands to lose by refusing our generous offer of continued membership in the galactic community. Jake Morrison nodded formally to the chamber, gathered his materials, and walked toward the exit. Behind him, the representatives of 12 species watched the human leave their presence, confident that he would return in 2 days with humanity's submission. After all, what choice did humans really have? As Jake activated his secure communicator outside the chamber, his message to Earth was brief and coded. But those who knew how to listen heard everything they needed in those few words. The die had been cast, the bridge had been burned, and humanity was about to make a choice that would change the galaxy forever. The message reached Earth in less than 6 hours, traveling through quantum communication networks that humanity had helped design and build. President Lisa Carter stood in the Situation Room deep beneath the White House, surrounded by her closest advisors and military commanders. The walls displayed real-time data from every human colony, outpost, and settlement scattered across 43 star systems. Protocol 7 is confirmed, she announced to the room. Begin immediate implementation across all human territories. General Chris Baker, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, leaned forward over the tactical display. Ma'am, are we certain about this course of action? We're talking about evacuating 37 million people from established colonies. The logistics are already planned, General, Carter interrupted. We've been preparing for this possibility since our first colony ships left Sol system. Every settlement was built with rapid evacuation protocols. Every colonist knew this day might come. Across human space, the greatest movement of people in galactic history began within hours of the President's order. On New Texas, Colony Administrator Ben Walsh received the coded transmission at 0347 local time. By dawn, evacuation sirens echoed across the sprawling agricultural settlements that had turned a barren world into humanity's breadbasket. Ben stood in the main communications center, coordinating with transport captains across 3 star systems. The numbers scrolled past on his screens. 2,800,000 colonists, 300,000 head of modified cattle, 15 major cities, 47 manufacturing complexes, and 112 automated mining operations. All of it had to be packed up and moved in less than 8 months. People first, then livestock, then equipment, Ben announced to his staff. Everything else gets destroyed rather than left behind. Nothing functional stays on this world when we leave. Similar scenes played out on dozens of worlds. On New Geneva, Dr. Amy Rodriguez supervised the careful dismantling of research laboratories that had produced breakthrough discoveries in quantum mechanics, biological engineering, and materials science. Each piece of equipment was cataloged, packed, and prepared for transport. The aliens had no idea what they were losing. Pack everything, Amy told her research teams. Every computer core, every sample, every prototype. If we built it, we take it. If we discovered it, we own it. None of this stays behind for them to claim later. The work was backbreaking and heartbreaking. Families that had lived on these worlds for generations packed their lives into cargo containers. Children who had never seen Earth asked their parents why they had to leave the only homes they had ever known. Parents struggled to explain that sometimes leaving was the only way to stay free. Captain Tony Sullivan commanded the cargo vessel Liberty Bell, one of 3,000 ships pressed into service for the evacuation. His ship had been designed to carry manufactured goods between star systems, but now its holds were filled with families, pets, personal belongings, and everything humans valued enough to carry across space. Log entry: Day 15 of evacuation operations. Tony recorded as his ship jumped into hyperspace with another load of refugees. Morale is surprisingly high among the passengers. These people aren't running away from something. They're running toward something. They believe in what we're doing, even if they don't fully understand it yet. Back on Earth, massive construction projects had begun the moment Protocol 7 was authorized. Dr. Karen Phillips led engineering teams working around the clock to expand orbital habitats, underwater cities, and lunar colonies. Earth itself was being transformed to accommodate the returning populations. We're not just bringing people home, Karen explained to her exhausted staff during a brief break in their 18-hour workdays. We're bringing home everything they learned, everything they built, everything they discovered out there. Earth is about to become the greatest concentration of human knowledge and capability in our species' history. The aliens initially watched the human exodus with amusement. The Zephyrian trade minister sent messages to human colonies, offering reduced sanctions in exchange for partial compliance with the Council's demands. His communications went unanswered. The Kalari attempted to buy human agricultural equipment at premium prices, assuming the evacuation was just negotiating theater. Their offers were ignored. It took 3 months for the galactic community to realize that humanity wasn't negotiating. They were actually leaving. On the industrial world of New Pittsburgh, factory supervisor Joe Martinez oversaw the systematic dismantling of manufacturing complexes that had supplied advanced technology to half the galaxy. The humans didn't just abandon their facilities. They took them apart piece by piece, loading everything from assembly robots to raw materials onto transport ships. Strip it all, Joe ordered his workers. Every bolt, every wire, every computer chip. What we can't carry, we melt down. What we can't melt down, we destroy. They wanted us gone? Fine. But they don't get to keep what we built. The psychological impact on human colonists was complex. Many grieved for the worlds they were leaving behind. Planets they had transformed from lifeless rocks into garden worlds, cities they had built from nothing, communities that had grown into vibrant civilizations. But underneath the sadness was something else. Excitement. Dr. Peter Hughes, evacuating his research station on Kepler 442b, explained it in his personal log. We came to these worlds as explorers and pioneers. We built something amazing out here among the stars, but we always knew we might have to leave someday. What we learned, what we built, who we became, none of that stays behind. We're taking all of it with us. The technical challenges were staggering. Moving entire populations across interstellar distances required coordination between military logistics specialists, civilian transport companies, and colonial administrators. Ships that had never been designed for passenger service were hastily converted. Cargo holds became temporary living spaces. Fighter pilots found themselves flying supply runs to remote settlements. Admiral Steve Johnson commanded the last major evacuation fleet to leave alien space. From the bridge of his flagship, he watched as the lights of human civilization disappeared into hyperspace one by one. Behind them, 37 worlds that had been transformed by human ingenuity went dark as automated systems shut down and defensive installations activated their self-destruct sequences. Inner log entry from beyond Sol system. Steve recorded as his ship prepared for the jump home. The evacuation is complete. Every human citizen who wanted to leave has been evacuated. Every piece of equipment worth saving has been saved. Every discovery worth protecting has been protected. We built an empire out here among the stars, and now we're taking it all home. The galaxy watched in growing alarm as human ships streamed back toward Sol system like a vast river flowing in reverse. What had started as apparent capitulation was revealing itself as something entirely different. Humanity wasn't surrendering to alien demands. They were consolidating their strength, gathering their resources, and preparing for independence. 6 months after the last human transport disappeared into hyperspace, the first cracks began to show in galactic civilization. What had started as minor inconveniences quickly escalated into major crises as the extent of alien dependence on human systems became clear. On the mining world of Kepler 442b, Kalari Overseer Glubnash floated in his environmental suit, staring at the collapsed entrance to what had been the galaxy's most productive rare metal extraction facility. The human miners had not simply abandoned their posts. They had systematically dismantled every piece of equipment, collapsed every tunnel, and destroyed every access point. How did they extract trilithium from solid rock? Glubnash asked his geological team, his voice bubbling with frustration through the suit's communication system. Our scanners show the deposits are still there, but we cannot reach them. The humans made it look easy, but now we see it was not digging. It was some kind of science. The Kalari had assumed that mining was simply a matter of digging holes and pulling out valuable materials. They had not understood the complex chemical processes, the precise drilling techniques, or the sophisticated extraction methods that humans had developed. What looked like manual labor had actually been advanced engineering, and now that knowledge was gone, similar discoveries shocked alien governments across the galaxy. The Zephyrian Hive Queen received increasingly desperate reports from her agricultural specialists. Human farming worlds had not just been abandoned, they had been stripped completely bare. The soil enhancement techniques, the genetic modifications that had made barren worlds bloom with crops, the careful ecosystem balancing that had sustained entire populations, all of it had vanished with the humans. The plants are dying, reported the Zephyrian agricultural coordinator, her pheromone signature heavy with distress. Without the human soil treatments, the enhanced crops cannot survive. Our food production has fallen by 60% in the past 3 months. We do not know how to maintain what they built. The food crisis hit quickly and hard. Worlds that had depended on human agricultural output found themselves facing famine. Prices for basic foodstuffs increased tenfold within weeks. Governments that had voted to expel humanity found themselves explaining to starving populations why they had driven away the species that fed the galaxy. Dr. Nancy Turner had been one of the last humans to evacuate from the research station on Proxima Centauri. Before leaving, she sent a final message to the galactic scientific community that devastated entire research programs across dozens of species. Effective immediately, all human research data is being withdrawn from shared galactic databases. Her message stated, patents held by human individuals and corporations are void outside of human space. Licensing agreements for human-developed technologies are terminated. Research partnerships with non-human entities are dissolved. The impact was catastrophic. Medical centers treating Vorthak crystal rot disease found themselves without access to the human-developed treatments that had saved millions of crystalline lives. Energy plants powered by human-designed fusion reactors began failing as alien engineers realized they did not understand the technology they had been using for decades. On the Vorthak homeworld, the great crystalline cities that had glittered across the landscape for millennia began to dim as power systems failed one by one. Chief Engineer Zeph Tar stood in the control room of the main power plant, watching displays that made no sense to him despite 40 years of experience. The humans always handled the technical maintenance, he admitted to the emergency council. We believed it was simple mechanical work, but these systems are far more complex than we understood. Without their expertise, we cannot keep the reactors stable. The proud Vorthak, who had considered themselves the most technologically advanced species in the galaxy, found themselves using primitive chemical fuels for the first time in over 1,000 years. Their cities, once symbols of crystalline perfection, became monuments to their own arrogance. Trade routes that had connected the galaxy for centuries began to fail, as ships equipped with human navigation systems lost their way in hyperspace. The elegant mathematics that human computers had made routine turned out to be incredibly complex calculations that alien navigators could not replicate. Merchant vessels vanished into hyperspace storms. Military patrols became lost between stars. and the network of commerce that held galactic civilization together started to unravel. On Earth, President Carter received daily briefings from Intelligence Chief Rick Patterson about the deteriorating situation in alien space. The reports painted a picture of civilizations in rapid decline as their dependence on human innovation became clear. Food riots on 3 Kalari worlds, power failures across the Vorthak systems, and complete breakdown of shipping in the Outer Rim sectors, Rick reported during the morning briefing. They're not just losing human trade partnerships, they're losing the basic infrastructure that made their modern civilization possible. The irony was not lost on human observers. In trying to limit human influence, the aliens had revealed how completely dependent they had become on human capabilities. Every aspect of galactic life, from food production to energy generation to space travel, had been quietly revolutionized by human innovation over the past 2 centuries. On Luna Base, engineer Kate Lewis supervised the construction of vast new cities designed to house the returning colonial populations. But these were not refugee camps or emergency shelters. They were advanced urban centers that incorporated every lesson learned from decades of colonial experience. "We're building something new here," Kate explained to her construction teams as they worked on the 15th residential tower of the month. "Every technique we learned on the colonies, every innovation we developed in alien space, every breakthrough we shared with species that didn't appreciate it, all of that is going into making Earth and the Sol system into something the galaxy has never seen before." Human science, freed from the restrictions of galactic oversight and the need to share discoveries with alien partners, advanced at an exponential rate. Dr. Peter Hughes, formerly a liaison with alien research institutions, now led purely human teams working on projects that would have been impossible under the old system. Without alien political concerns, without having to justify our research to 12 different species, without having to share every breakthrough with beings who saw our discoveries as threats rather than gifts, Peter noted in his research log, "We are advancing faster than ever before. We are discovering things about the universe that we never would have found while trying to maintain galactic diplomatic balance." The refugee populations from the abandoned colonies brought with them not just personal belongings and memories, but also decades of experience in transforming hostile environments into thriving communities. They carried knowledge of alien ecosystems, insights into interspecies relations, and most importantly, the hard-won understanding that humanity could survive and thrive anywhere in the universe. As the situation in alien space continued to deteriorate, some species began sending desperate diplomatic messages toward Sol system. The messages went unanswered. Humanity had made its choice, and that choice was independence. The galaxy that had once seemed so vast and powerful now felt small and fragile. The civilizations that had considered themselves ancient and wise were revealed as dependent children who had been living off the innovations of a species they had dismissed as too young and too dangerous. The council that had voted unanimously to expel humanity now faced the consequences of that decision as their worlds went dark, their people went hungry, and their ships became lost among the stars. 1 year after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council chambers on Nexus Prime felt like a tomb. Where once 12 species had gathered in dignity and power, now only 7 representatives sat in the vast circular space, their voices echoing hollow in the emptiness. The others had withdrawn entirely, too focused on their own survival to participate in galactic politics. Councillor Kethvar of the Vorthak stood before the nearly empty chamber, his crystalline form noticeably dimmer than it had been during humanity's expulsion. His people's great cities were running on emergency power, their population centers slowly going dark as fusion reactors failed one by one. The technical manuals left behind by human engineers might as well have been written in an alien language, which, ironically, they had been. "The situation continues to deteriorate across all member territories," Kethvar announced, his voice lacking its former authority. "Food production in Kalari space has fallen to 30% of pre-Exodus levels. Zephyrian population centers are experiencing mass starvation. Our own energy infrastructure is failing faster than we can implement primitive alternatives." The Kalari representative, Councillor Splashnin, floated in her water-filled pod with obvious distress. She had replaced Ambassador Plishko after his government fell during the food riots that swept across 3 Kalari homeworlds. Her first words to the Council carried the weight of species-wide desperation. "We must contact Earth immediately," Splashanen declared, her translated voice distorted by urgency. "My people are dying. The agricultural techniques that sustained our population for the past century were all human innovations. Without human soil enhancement, without human crop genetics, without human ecosystem management, our worlds cannot support our current population levels." The statistics were devastating. Kalari population centers that had grown to accommodate 8 billion individuals now faced the stark reality that their worlds could naturally support less than half that number. The excess billions faced starvation unless immediate action was taken, but the Kalari were not alone in their crisis. The Zephyrian Hive Queen had sent increasingly desperate communications from her homeworld. The genetic plague that had nearly destroyed her species 50 years ago was returning, and the human-developed treatments that had saved the Zephyrian race were no longer available. Our reproduction chambers are failing, the Zephyrian representative reported through pheromone translation systems. The genetic stabilization therapy that humans provided is breaking down. Our birth rate has fallen by 70%. Our population may be extinct within 3 generations without immediate medical intervention. The irony was crushing. The Zephyrians had voted to expel humanity, partly because they feared human genetic research might threaten their species' purity. Now they faced extinction because they had lost access to the very human innovations that had preserved their genetic integrity. On distant Earth, President Carter received daily reports from Intelligence Chief Rick Patterson about the collapsing galactic situation. The data painted a picture of civilizations in free fall, their technological foundations crumbling as the extent of their dependence on human innovation became clear. 17 worlds have been completely abandoned in the past 6 months. Rick reported during the morning briefing. The terraforms are reverting to subsurface living because they can't maintain their atmospheric processors. The nebulons are losing cohesion because their containment technology was based on human electromagnetic theory they never fully understood. The refugee crisis in alien space had reached catastrophic proportions. Populations that could no longer be sustained on their homeworlds fled to other systems, overwhelming civilizations that were struggling with their own collapse. Ship after ship attempted journeys through hyperspace using obsolete navigation systems, and many simply vanished into the void. The galactic economy, which had once spanned thousands of star systems and supported trillions of beings, had contracted to a handful of local trade networks using primitive chemical propulsion. The elegant network of instantaneous commerce that had defined galactic civilization was gone, destroyed by humanity's departure. Dr. Karen Phillips continued her work expanding Earth's orbital infrastructure, but now the returning colonial populations brought more than just their belongings. They brought detailed intelligence about every alien technology, every governmental weakness, and every strategic vulnerability they had observed during their time in galactic space. They never understood what we were doing for them, Karen observed as she reviewed reports from former colonial administrators. They saw us as aggressive competitors, but we were actually holding their civilization together. Every human colony was a support node for alien infrastructure. Every human research station was solving problems that alien scientists couldn't handle alone. The technological renaissance that had begun with humanity's return to Sol system accelerated. As freed from galactic oversight and competition, human researchers, no longer required to share their discoveries or navigate alien political sensitivities, achieved breakthroughs that revolutionized everything from space travel to energy production. Dr. Peter Hughes led research teams that had cracked the fundamental problems of consciousness transfer, matter manipulation at the quantum level, and dimensional physics that allowed travel between parallel universes. These advances came not despite humanity's isolation from the galaxy, but because of it. When we were part of the galactic community, we spent half our time explaining our research to alien oversight committees, and the other half trying to adapt our discoveries to alien physiologies and technologies. Peter noted in his research journal, "Now we can focus purely on advancing human capabilities. The results speak for themselves." Luna Base had become the hub of a growing network of human settlements that stretched throughout Sol system and beyond. Unlike their previous colonies in alien space, these new settlements were built using purely human technology, operated by purely human personnel, and designed to support purely human interests. Engineer Kate Lewis supervised construction projects that would have been impossible under galactic regulations. Massive orbital rings around Jupiter collected energy on a scale that dwarfed entire alien civilizations. Asteroid mining operations extracted resources using techniques that made the old Kalari facilities look like children playing with toys. We're not just rebuilding human civilization, Kate explained to her engineering teams as they completed another impossible project ahead of schedule. We're building a better version of it. Everything we learned from living among the aliens, every compromise we had to make, every restriction we had to accept, we're discarding all of that and building something purely human. The psychological transformation of humanity was as significant as the technological advances. The colonial populations that returned from alien space brought with them hard-won knowledge about survival, independence, and the dangers of trusting other species with humanity's future. They had seen firsthand how quickly allies could become enemies, and how easily dependence could become slavery. Captain Tony Sullivan, who had transported thousands of families during the evacuation, now commanded exploration vessels pushing into regions of space no alien species had ever visited. His logs reflected the new human mindset that was emerging from the Exodus experience. We used to think of ourselves as the newcomers in a galaxy full of ancient civilizations. Tony recorded as his ship explored a previously unknown star system. Now we realize we were the foundation that held everything together. Without us, their ancient civilizations are collapsing back into primitive barbarism. Maybe it's time we stopped trying to fit into their galaxy and started building our own. The reports from alien space grew worse each day. Governments fell, populations fled their homeworlds, and species that had existed for millennia faced extinction. The proud galactic civilization that had dominated the stars for thousands of years was disintegrating because they had driven away the one species that had made their modern existence possible. In the council chambers on Nexus Prime, the few remaining representatives faced a terrible truth. They had not expelled a dangerous rival from their community. They had expelled the beating heart that kept their civilization alive. 2 years after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council chambers echoed with the sound of desperation. Only 4 species still sent representatives to Nexus Prime, and even they came not as proud members of a galactic civilization, but as desperate survivors begging for solutions to problems they could no longer solve alone. Counselor Kethvar stood before the nearly empty chamber, his crystalline form so dim it was barely visible in the failing light of the chamber's once magnificent illumination systems. Behind him, the great windows that had once shown the bustling traffic of galactic civilization now revealed empty space, broken only by the occasional refugee ship fleeing another failed world. Distinguished colleagues, Kethvar began, though the word distinguished rang hollow in the vast emptiness. We face an unprecedented crisis that threatens the very existence of our civilizations. Food shortages have reached critical levels across 7 systems. Energy infrastructure has collapsed on 14 worlds. 12 entire colonies have been abandoned due to environmental failures we cannot correct. The statistics were a litany of civilizational collapse. Galactic trade had fallen to less than 5% of pre-Exodus levels. Hyperspace travel had become so unreliable that most species had reverted to slower-than-light travel for essential journeys. The technological base that had supported trillions of beings across thousands of worlds was crumbling beyond repair. Counselor Splashinen of the Kalari floated in her environmental pod, her large eyes showing the exhaustion of a species pushed to the edge of extinction. Her homeworld's population had crashed from 8 billion to less than 2 billion as famine and environmental collapse claimed lives by the millions. We must humble ourselves, Splashinen announced, her voice carrying across the chamber with the weight of absolute necessity. We must contact Earth. We must invite humanity back to the galactic community with whatever terms they demand. Pride is a luxury we can no longer afford. The formal proposal that followed was unprecedented in galactic history. Not only would humanity be invited back to the Council, but they would be granted permanent seats on the Security Council, exemption from all previous restrictions, preferential trade status, and compensation for the damages caused by their forced exodus. It was everything the aliens had refused to consider 2 years earlier, and more. The vote was unanimous among the surviving representatives, but even as they cast their votes, each knew it was probably too late. The galaxy they wanted humanity to rejoin no longer existed. 3 months later, an alien delegation arrived at the edge of Sol system, aboard one of the few remaining long-range vessels still capable of interstellar travel. What they found there shattered their last hopes of returning to the old galactic order. Sol system had been transformed beyond recognition. Massive orbital installations surrounded every planet and major moon. Asteroid mining operations on a scale that dwarfed entire alien civilizations processed raw materials with efficiency that seemed almost magical. Energy collectors around the sun harvested power on levels that could support populations larger than most alien homeworlds. But most shocking of all were the ships. Human vessels patrolled Sol system using technology that was clearly decades ahead of anything in alien space. Their hulls gleamed with materials that seemed to bend light around them. Their engines left trails of energy that suggested propulsion systems based on principles the aliens did not. Recognized Admiral Patricia Moore commanded the solar defense fleet that intercepted the alien delegation at the heliopause. Her flagship alone was larger and more advanced than the entire combined fleet that had escorted the delegation from Nexus Prime. When she spoke to the alien representatives, her words carried the quiet confidence of absolute technological superiority. "Welcome to Sol system," Admiral Moore announced through the communication channels. "State your business and be aware that you are currently surrounded by defensive installations that monitor every molecule in this star system." The alien delegation was escorted to Earth by ships that made their own vessels look like antiques. During the journey, they observed construction projects that defied their understanding of physics and engineering. Humans were building structures that stretched between planets, installations that seemed to exist partially in other dimensions, and habitats that contained entire ecosystems in spaces that should have been too small to hold them. On Earth, the alien delegation met with human representatives in a conference room that overlooked the transformed landscape of humanity's homeworld. Where once there had been a single species struggling to expand beyond their birth planet, now there was a civilization that had turned an entire star system into a single, integrated habitat supporting billions of humans living in conditions of unprecedented prosperity and security. Ambassador Jake Morrison, recalled from retirement to handle the negotiations, greeted the alien delegation with the same calm professionalism he had shown 2 years earlier in the council chambers. But now he spoke from a position of absolute strength rather than desperate diplomacy. "We appreciate your offer," Jake said after reviewing the aliens' proposal for humanity's return to the galactic community. "The terms are generous, far more generous than anything offered during our previous membership. However, after careful consideration, humanity must respectfully decline." The silence in the conference room stretched for long moments as the alien representatives struggled to comprehend what they had just heard. They had offered humanity everything they had once demanded and more. They had humbled themselves before a species they had once dismissed. And humanity was saying no. Jake continued, his voice gentle but firm. "During our time in galactic space, humanity learned many valuable lessons. We learned that independence is more valuable than acceptance. We learned that our innovations were seen as threats rather than gifts. We learned that cooperation requires mutual respect, and that respect must be earned through strength, not granted through submission." He gestured toward the windows, where the transformed Sol system stretched out in all its impossible glory. "We have spent the past 2 years building something better than what we lost. We have created a civilization that serves human interests, operates by human values, and grows according to human potential, rather than alien fears." The alien delegates made increasingly desperate appeals. They spoke of shared heritage, of the bonds formed during centuries of cooperation, of the mutual benefits that had once made galactic civilization great. But their words rang hollow against the reality of what they had lost and what humanity had gained. Dr. Helen Ross, who had remained behind to study the galactic collapse, presented her final report to both the human and alien representatives. Her analysis was clinical and devastating. "The galactic community was never a partnership of equals," she stated. "It was a dependent system in which human innovation and capability supported civilizations that had stagnated millennia ago. The aliens did not expel a member species from their community. They amputated the limbs that allowed their civilization to function. The delegation returned to what remained of galactic space, carrying humanity's polite but final refusal. There would be no reconciliation, no return to the old ways, no salvation for the dying civilizations that had chosen to reject the species that had made their prosperity possible. In the council chambers on Nexus Prime, Councillor Kethavar delivered the final session address to an audience of empty seats and failing systems. His words were recorded for posterity, though few would survive to remember them. "We believed we were pruning a tree that had grown too tall and too quickly," he said, his dim crystalline form flickering in the chamber's dying light. "We discovered too late that we had been living in its shade, and now we face the darkness we have brought upon ourselves." Outside the chamber windows, the last ships departed Nexus Prime for homeworlds that might not survive another year. The great experiment in galactic civilization was ending not with war or catastrophe, but with the simple recognition that some mistakes cannot be corrected, and some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. Humanity had made their choice, and that choice was to shine alone among the stars rather than dim their light to make others comfortable. The galaxy would have to learn to live in the darkness they had created, while beyond the boundaries of their dying civilization, human ships explored regions of space no alien would ever see, carrying the bright torch of a species that had chosen independence over acceptance and strength over submission.